Right, I think let's make a start, shall we? So, as I said, depending on where you're joining us from, it's either good morning or good afternoon, and welcome to our webinar here, which is entitled Teaching the Machines. And our focus this afternoon, is going to be about AI discovery, more specifically, how the LLMs perform behind the scenes to drive visibility for the companies in the B2B technology space. And I think I'm right in saying that most of you are representing a technology company. So really imagine that we're talking about your company and your role as marketing professionals or communications professionals too. So, our own research leading up to this already tells us that your customers are already asking LLMs or generative AI engines to interpret the market for them. And these tools we're seeing increasingly are learning from the content and the sources and the signals that already exist around your company, and also the market opportunities that you're also pursuing. So we're asking ourselves today how visible are we as companies in the whole search process? And if we are visible, are we actually invisible for the right reasons? And are we described accurately and presented accurately according to where we see ourselves in the current life cycle or wherever a company may find itself? So we're going to make a start. I'm going to start by some introductions. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Paul Nolan. I am the Joint Managing Director of the Hoffman Agency here in the UK. Very much a PR specialist, very much on the earned media side. And I've worked in the PR space now in B2B tech for more than 20 years. So I'm going to be doing the front half of this webinar and talking predominantly about the influence of earned media on LLMs. For those of you that don't know, my background is very kind of guided and biased towards the telecom sector as well. So don't be surprised if I kind of lean on that a little bit more than the other areas as we move forward. Dan, would you like to just say a quick hello?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. As Executive Vice President, I look after our integrated marketing proposition. So I'm not necessarily a PR person, but I have worked in kind of comms within B2B tech for about 20 years. What I find most interesting and why I'm talking with Paul here is how the mechanics of influence and the mechanics of kind of the nuance of communication needs to be thought about in terms of lots of different formats and lots of different channels, and making sure that good storytelling is also appropriate for every kind of touch point and every kind of channel. So at Hoffman, I work with clients on that kind of more integrated, multi-channel, multi-format vision that is largely driven and led by the PR teams.
Thanks, Dan. And the eagle eye amongst you will also spot another gentleman on the on the screen. That is Takeo Apich, who is our Chief Digital Officer in the APAC region. And the reason Takeo is with us is he actually develops the Hoffman Agency's proprietary AI tool, Jedi, which is really the foundation of the research that we're going to be going through today. So I wanted him to join, not least because I was anticipating some questions that I might not be able to answer. So he is my saving grace on that basis. Okay, so let's just look at the agenda. As I said, it's a webinar of two halves. The first part is about going through the earned media landscape, looking at specifically Jedi, what it does, what the research was started to reveal, and what it actually did reveal. And then Dan is going to conclude by going through, as he said earlier, the other kind of notable channels that help shape a content strategy for a particular company to help optimize its AI visibility. So we will make a start and talk about what we describe as the AI discovery shift. And it is a big shift too. And we'll explain why. And actually the opening line here is a point that should make all of us as B2B marketers kind of pause for thought and pause for breath. Because LLMs are now shaping decisions, even building vendor recommendations and shortlists before your customers are even reaching your own website or any of your own channels. A growing number of searches are ending without a click. And the traffic being referred by LLMs can be highly valuable because the customer has already made some form of kind of guided research experience before they actually arrive to talk to you as a company or to visit your site. So the implication is simple. If AI systems are kind of forming the initial impressions of your organizations, then your brand needs to show up in that answer as accurately and as credibly as possible. So this is about learning what we can do to put you in the strongest possible position for when the LLMs start to scrutinize you as a business. And what we've seen is that actually the behavioral change is actually quite simple, because beforehand or traditionally, the buyer may visit up to 10 different sources before they actually arrive at a particular company. They might start with a Google search. They then might look at the trade media. They might then look at an analyst report. They might compare different vendor websites. They might validate on peer review platforms or ask their contacts in the industry in terms of who they might have worked with before or who they work with currently. Now, the current reality is that the same buyer may ask an LLM one question and get one synthesized answer from that platform that brings all of those different sources together. So AI is not making the old influence ecosystem disappear at all. What it's actually doing is compressing it. So the same sources are still shaping the perception, but they're being filtered and summarized into one response by a machine. So what's interesting is behind the scenes at Hoffman, we've actually been looking at the B2B tech buying journey for a long time. And we actually commission our own research into in all the different sectors which we specialize as a business. And for this particular research study that I'm going to be going through shortly, we actually focused on 4 of those sectors, which are telecoms, as already mentioned, being my particular heritage. We've got fintech, we've got cybersecurity, and we've also got enterprise technology as well. And for each of those different sectors, before we even start talking about geo, I can already tell you, based on the results of focused research into those different markets that started. I think the telecoms research that I've got on this slide here was concluded in October of last year. And actually, most recently, cybersecurity, our research was only launched 2 days ago. So this is very, very fresh and very, very real. We are seeing a very, very rapid increase in the tech decision makers using LLMs to accelerate their decision-making process. So from a telecoms perspective, we're seeing 20% of the telco buyer use LLMs to build shortlists for RFPs. A similar number in the cybersecurity space. Enterprise technology is around 17%, fintech about 16%. We only started asking them specifically about LLM use at the back end of last year, right? So these are early statistics, early percentage points, and we think that they are going to accelerate dramatically, looking at what else is happening in other parts of the industry, in other industry sectors. So that brings us on to JEDI. So JEDI stands for Generative Engine Discovery Insights. And as I said to you before, it's the Hoffman Agency's our own proprietary AI discovery platform that was developed by Takeo, who's based in Tokyo. And we built it to understand a very kind of simple question, and that is how companies, or specifically to the Hoffman Agency, how our clients show up across LLMs, and whether or not they are accurately positioned or positively described. JEDI enables us to prompt up to 8 different LLMs simultaneously, and most of our analysis is focused on most of the research we actually did, and we're going to take you through shortly, was based on the 4 major LLMs, so ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and Perplexity, but it does also support the major Chinese platforms too, including DeepSeek. And what JEDI does is that it launches these prompts, it then collates all of the results from all of the prompts across all of the LLMs, and it provides the source reference material behind the results and why the LLMs actually were led towards making the decisions that it did. And it also provides the source references that support all of the results. And that then helps us split between the results and the citations that support the results. It enables us to see how many of them come from the vendor community, how many of them are influenced by media sites, how many of them come from industry analysts, trade associations, or other or more. And it enables us to kind of look at the impact of each of the of each different content type and channel. And that helps us because we can also see which of the LLMs are the most trusted source for each of the particular prompts, and it can tell us how many of the different citations are actually quoted by more than one LLM at the same time, something we call overlap analysis. So it really does give us a deep and comprehensive holistic view of how an LLM sees a particular organization. And as I said, on Tuesday, all of the research information I'm going to be taking you through shortly is actually going to be launched and available. And the study is called Understanding AI Discovery in B2B Technology Markets. I'll take you through exactly what the research is about and what it says shortly, and you will receive a copy of this report after the webinar will be distributed to you via email ASAP as a thank you for actually joining in person. So, what's it all about? So we use JEDI to understand technology buying behaviors, as I said, in 4 of our target markets: telecoms, cybersecurity, enterprise technology, and fintech. And what we did was, because we wanted to communicate the results in a language which our clients and our prospects are going to understand in their own language, which is about communicating the opportunities that exist in the markets in which they operate. So what we actually did was take on personas of the target customer for each of our organizations, and we then ran a prompt across the four LLMs, as I described, just to try and understand what was going on in the background. We then were able to take all of the results. We did 1 prompt per industry sector, but we then actually looked at 4 different dimensions to those prompts, and I'll come on to that in a second. We then took all of the source information and all of the results, and we analysed what were the kind of key trends, and we looked at, as I said before, how many of the different citations overlap different LLMs to provide that view as well. So the 4 buying personas and the 4 audiences are as follows. In telecoms, the core buying audience that we typically go after on behalf of our clients is the operator CTO. And we used an industry opportunity around network AI and automation, because any of you in the telecoms industry will know that that is a very, very popular discussion and opportunity for any telco at the moment, trying to drive as much efficiency from their infrastructure as possible. In cybersecurity, we looked at ransomware and quantum. Again, quantum is almost as topical as AI in general, as far as enterprises and any kind of organization looking to shore up their cyber defenses. And the persona that we took on was a chief information security officer from a global enterprise. Enterprise technology, we looked at, unsurprisingly, AI and the infrastructure that supports the AI phenomenon, and looking at the data center provisioning that sits behind that. And the persona there was a chief information officer at a large enterprise. And then finally, we actually had 3 different opportunities for fintech, and I'll explain why. We started with tokenization, and we were surprised by the relatively low level of earned media citations compared to the other areas that we ran. And we wondered if this was just an anomaly. So we chose a couple of others to give us a spread. So we went from tokenization to embedded finance to financial crime. We felt that financial crime would be the most commonly written about because it is so widely reported and affects so many different organizations or people that would give us the best earned media percentage of citations to support the search results. Now, it's quite difficult when you come to prompting, because obviously you have to anticipate that an individual can ask for prompts as many different times as it likes, and it is impossible to know exactly what one particular customer is going to ask of one opportunity or of one vendor community at one time. So we had to kind of break it down and think, all right, well, what's most logical, and how can we create a variety of different prompts that really is going to cover all the different eventualities. So we subdivided it into 4 areas. The first one is obvious, is discovery. What types of vendors or platforms should I be considering per sector and opportunity? Comparison was about how the leading vendors compare on capabilities. Fit is, would a certain company be a good fit for my environment? And we picked 1 company per the 4 different areas. I'm not going to tell you which one, because this is about the process and not the individual results. And the last one is validation. What are the strengths and weaknesses of said vendor versus said alternatives? And we thought that would be useful because a lot of the work we do with the analyst community is exactly about that validation question. If you look at the magic quadrants, or if you look for the validation and endorsement you can get from influential people, that obviously helps our clients stand out and differentiate themselves from their rivals. So that's how we did it. And the actual, give you an idea of the prompts that we actually asked verbatim. For telecoms, as I said, we are dealing with increasing network complexity driven by 5G, multi-vendor infrastructure, and rising traffic demands. What types of AI-driven network management or automation platforms should I be considering, and which vendors are known for this? So it gives you an example of the level of detail that we're going into. I will actually say that the actual prompts we ran for the research started with the quantification of the persona himself. So it actually started with I am a telco CTO, and then went into the prompt. And I didn't include that because there's enough words on this side already, just to give you a sense. And as you can see, other examples from different sectors. I'm not going to read all of them individually, but you can get a feel for the level of detail that we asked to try and get the most credible responses we could. So one of the clearest lessons from all of this is that the AI visibility varies depending on several factors. It depends on A, the maturity of the media ecosystem that serves the market. So sectors with deep specialist media like telecoms and cybersecurity gave the AI systems much more editorial material to read and reference. And it depends on how well defined a particular market opportunity or category is. So established categories produce more consistent answers. So network AI in telecoms, for example, is widely discussed by every vendor and telco everywhere, and every single media outlet is writing about it. Therefore, there is a wealth of evidence for the LLMs to draw from, and that is reflected in the amount of media that responded and were actually shown in the results. So established categories will always produce more consistent answers. It also depends very much on the prompt, the phrasing of the prompt itself. So a discovery prompt can surface very different sources from a validation prompt, which is why we had a breadth, just to try and get an equivalent sample and be as consistent as possible against all of the different areas that we looked at. It also depends on which engine is asked and when, because different engines, they weight sources differently, and results just change over time. So generally also looks for the patterns and not just the one-offs as well. I think that's important, looking at how all of this stuff is evolving. So what did we find out? What did the research say? Right, the first, as we said this at the beginning, right, the most important takeaway is that AI discovery is not inventing a completely new system of influence. It's nothing. All it's doing is reorganizing the system that already existed and that people already know. So trade media analyst firms, standards bodies, trade associations, vendor content itself, social media, and professional signals all still matter. The only difference is the interface has changed because, as I said before, AI is compressing all of these signals into one answer. So the sources that once shaped the perception are now more indirectly shaping the words that buyers may see at the moment of discovery. And getting into specifics, looking at the earned media citations. Now, it's important to stress that actually this is based on the prompts that I put forward, across a particular opportunity at a particular moment in time. So all of these percentages and the representation of earned media here will always vary. So no one should be going away from this thinking that fintech only has 10 to 13% citations, therefore earned media is not worth pursuing in fintech, because it simply isn't true. I can tell you by playing around with the numerous different prompts I've been working on over the last 2 to 3 months that the 23% percentage for telecoms has exceeded 40% in certain areas. If you really do kind of fine tune a particular prompt in an area which is very, very hotly contested, discussed, written about. But for this particular analysis, as I said, tokenization, 10% of all references or citations came from earned media, up to as high as 23% for telecoms and network AI. And as I said, that has gone as high as 40% for other prompts. So it does show that earned media is having a notable impact on the LLMs in terms of influence. But it's obviously, with these percentage points, it's clearly not working in isolation. And I think Dan will touch on that in more detail as we move forward. So earned media is shaping AI discovery in 3 ways, right? The first one is that it's acting as a discovery layer. Specialist trait titles are helping AI systems, compare the different options and frame narratives, especially in mature sectors like telecoms. It's also acting as a credibility signal. In cybersecurity, for example, AI systems draw not only on the editorial commentary, but also on the formal expertise from institutional sources like NIST. And also it's creating the cross-engine authority that I mentioned before as well, which is when the same sources are cited across multiple LLMs, because that creates a much, much stronger authority signal than an isolated citation on its own. So from a PR perspective, therefore, the aim is not just the volume of coverage, it's also the placement in the sources that AI systems are repeatedly trusting. And the analysis helps us determine which different media sources they are. So we can actually help guide the content strategy, the media relations strategy for our clients in a more scientific and surgical way as a result. So looking at it sector by sector, the pattern becomes clearer. In telecoms, earned media was strong because the trade media ecosystem, as I said before, is very mature. Analyst influence was moderate in this instance. It does vary according to the different prompts. And also major vendor domains had a majorly significant role. In fact, across all of them, owned vendor content is almost always the most authoritative when it comes to LLM education and guidance. So in cybersecurity, the trust base was a lot more blended and nuanced. Media still matters, but so did formal technical authority and institutional sources. From an enterprise tech perspective, earned media was again moderate and it concentrated around fewer high visibility sources. I think infrastructure provided content played a major role. In fintech, earned media was lower and highly topic dependent. Owned media did the heavy lifting because I think some areas of the category are still emerging. Well, that's certainly the view from our fintech expert. And they're also less consistently covered by specialist media as well, which I think has a big impact. So the takeaway is that every category has its own pattern, its own source pattern. Therefore, the more visibility you have over more LLMs, over more topics, the more you're able to understand how that pattern is evolving and how you can stay one step ahead of it to actually help guide, so we can help guide companies in the right direction. So just a word on analyst relations. Historically, looking at our tech buyer insights, industry analysts are always one of the most influential channels for B2B tech buying, and they still have a notable role to play in terms of LLM influence as well. And then that's especially true, I think, in the more complex or emerging issue areas. I think they really help AI systems structure categories and understand them better. I think cybersecurity is a good example from what we saw. So formal technical authority from NIST, for example, carried a lot more weight alongside the trade media. In enterprise tech, there's a lot of analyst sources, infrastructure providers, I think, share that authority layer. In fintech, analysts' influence is lower, and the vendor-owned content filled more of that kind of explanatory gap. So again, it depends on what's available in those different sectors. But for comms teams, I think this widens the area of influence. I think that analyst relations and standards bodies, trade associations, and any other kind of credible institutions, they're not just plays for reputation. They are doing far more work behind the scenes in terms of helping AI systems understand and categorize your company brand. And I would certainly say that is true in the telecom space as well. If you think about how many industry associations exist, like TM4, like the GSMA, like 3GPP, there's a whole bunch of them. And actually, in a lot of the other prompts that we've been running, their reports and their collaborative work is very, very high up on the citation list and on the overlap analysis as well. So I think that kind of concludes the earned media section. So I'm going to hand over to Dan now because he's going to kind of talk about how this conversation broadens. So in summary, no doubt in my mind that earned media clearly matters a lot. But I think if we just treated that in isolation, we'd be missing the big point. And I think Dan is now going to explain why.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, I think it's so interesting. Every time we run these JALA reports, it reinforces some really valuable and really interesting kind of principles. And that slide there that Paul showed around the different sectors having their own pattern, the different verticals having their own pattern based on, you know, the amount of available information that the LLM was trained on. That's going to be a big influence on the types of content that are influencing citations. But ultimately, what we're seeing and what we consistently see is that it's a broad picture. It's an important and a critical principle that only relying on PR or only relying on owned website content in order to try and drive the correct kind of citations from LLMs is kind of suboptimal. Paul, I can't move the slide forward. So if you could just, if I give you the wink, there we go, perfect. So what we really need to understand is that to embrace LLMs as part of the marketing mix, which they are part of the buying journey. They're part of that discovery phase. They are a necessary part of the marketing mix. We kind of need to accept that while the conventions of influence remain the same, embracing LLMs means a bit more of an integrated vision for storytelling and for comms and generally for earned media. Whilst we have seen that PR can successfully get an AI to notice you, if your website, if your thought leadership, if your owned digital content, if your social, if the way that your brand is spoken about in communities and forums isn't aligned perfectly with what you're saying with your PR and media relations, then any LLM or any agent is open to misrepresenting you through hallucinations or missing you altogether. Great coverage on its own. Without consistent terminology, the same consistent terminology on site, on high domain authority sites, on social and in those communities, sends weak signals to the LLMs. And the solution to this is kind of absolute alignment across all of those important and influential nodes across the internet. Your owned content must mirror the exact language, categories, proof points that your earned coverage does, so the AI can connect the dots. No single channel builds AI visibility or LLM visibility on its own. And we often get asked questions, and I'm sure there are questions amongst everyone here around how long does it take and how quickly can we begin to kind of hack and game this new mechanic? And the answer to that is the more consistent you are, the more you embrace all of these different parts of and different touch points that influence the audience, the more consistent you are across all of them, the quicker you will see significant improvement in LLMs. And we often describe this difference or this challenge as the difference between a claim and a fact. If you are not consistent in the language, in the frameworks, in the way that you talk about your category, your value prop, your products, if there is not consistency across all of those different parts of the internet, all you are doing is making unrelated claims in lots of different areas, right? In lots of different kind of parts of the internet. But an LLM is a probability engine. An LLM's job is to provide statistically the most likely response to your prompt. An LLM is looking for facts, and the way it understands the difference between a claim and a fact is how broadly it's corroborated everywhere. They want to be able to see the things that you're saying about yourself in your PR corroborated precisely across your own, across social, across your thought leadership, across everywhere that you want to talk and everywhere that talks about the technology that you represent. That is a really important component. Turning claims you make about yourself into corroborated facts is how you get regularly cited. Go ahead, Paul. So this is an issue of representation and consistency, and to kind of address this as an internal heuristic initially, but we found that this has been useful as a framework for our clients as well. We've kind of come up with a this three-pillar framework, or three-pillar strategy, and yeah, think of it as a heuristic for generating that kind of consistency. Pillar one is define the category. Something that we call the bridge strategy, and all that means is that it's bridging using the same concepts to bridge all of the different touch points and nodes you need to use and leverage to talk about yourselves. You must anchor your brand and your products and your technology at the intersection of established concepts that the AI already understands. And it's really important over the next few slides that we keep in mind that we are talking about driving discovery for LLMs. This is not about reducing and diluting storytelling. There are plenty of opportunities to still use language to differentiate yourself, and we'll get onto that in a bit. But defining the category is a really critical pillar in terms of giving LLMs what they need in order to cite you more regularly and see what you're saying as a fact rather than a claim. Category creation, by the way, is not our friend in an LLM world. And what I mean by that is using unique and what we see as differentiated language in order to try to reframe our category. All that's doing is using language that definitely won't be used anywhere else in order to try and contextualize our value proposition and our products. That is a recipe for invisibility. I would strongly recommend not, when you're thinking about content that you're using to drive LLM citations, not trying to invent new language, new concepts, or re-articulate your category in a different way, because you lack that corroboration. And I guess what I mean in terms of where to do that kind of content, the consistency needs to be everywhere, from your H1 tags, your boilerplates, your coverage, your PR, your thought leadership, the product descriptions, the about us sections of websites, and any branded presence. So that's defining the category. Those are the really important components of that pillar. The second one is claim the attribute. And again, once we've been consistent about telling the LLMs where we operate in that intersection of, or the category that we operate in, and using those very well acknowledged and understood concepts to frame that intersection. Claim the attribute, which is more around your unique value proposition and your IP or your products. This is about a really interesting type of consistency that we've kind of called the one word rule. Multi-benefit brands lose AI recall. The more simple and the more economical you are in your content about your value proposition, your product, in your content that is specifically geared to drive LLMs and LLM citations, the more economical you are in the language you use to describe them. For instance, one dominant adjective. And lead that with 70% of content titles, and across 70% of product thought leadership. You're giving the LLMs every opportunity that they need to not just acknowledge you, but actually cite you for all of those top of funnel discovery prompts. The final pillar is establish the sequence. So once we've got the intersection of the category, once we've defined our category, and we begin to use consistently economic language to describe the attributes, the sequence is about building a logic layer, and there's really more for agentic use than LLMs, but ultimately the way that the mathematics that underpins agents and LLMs is the same. Establishing the sequence is about providing granular step-by-step instructional playbooks and schemas on landing pages that agents can use to actually execute a task. An LLM simply wants to retrieve your information and serve it as a response to a prompt. An agent has tasks it is been asked to achieve, and establishing the sequence is about creating the structure of content, a logic layer that describes your brand, your product, your value proposition, your point of difference through instructional playbooks, step-by-step guides, and landing page schemas that make that provide kind of snippets of information that an agent can lift wholesale and use it as as a response to a task. The reason that this pillar is important is we are seeing an increased use across the B2B verticals that we work in for buyers and the procurement divisions of buyers to use procurement specific agents. One of the biggest growth areas in the use of agents is procurement for large enterprise level tech buying. And typically that agent will be given parameters around technology, around cost, around compliance, around any kind of ISO kind of regulation, use cases, and kind of key product features. It'll be given a list of those things and then told to go and find a shortlist, provide a full business case for each vendor on the shortlist, and then make a recommendation that a human can take and actually continue the buying journey with those shortlisted vendors. So it isn't enough to just define the category and claim the attribute, because that's effectively just looking at LLMs. A fuller picture is about establishing the sequence and structuring for agentic use as well. Go for it, Paul. So this requires a bit of a tweak to content strategy. This is not about rethinking or reimagining what a content strategy is, but it does need a bit of a kind of a process or a chronology to it. First and foremost, and if you take anything away from my bit of this presentation, it would be to remove all gates from your content. If your content is gated, an LLM cannot use the information to cite to you, and therefore you are choosing to minimize your discoverability. There is no need to gate content anyway, but particularly now LLMs are part of that early stage buying journey. Remove gating all content, asking for names and email addresses just to be able to build your database or generate leads. It will reduce your visibility. Secondly, we need to shift our focus from just looking at raw website traffic, and we're all still guilty, I think, of looking at landing page traffic and looking at landing and kind of referral sources. But we actually need to just subtly at the top of the funnel change how what we're looking at as or how much we value website traffic, because a decrease in top of funnel website traffic, and we're all seeing decreases in traffic, right? Almost every website on the planet is seeing a decrease in organic traffic, but a decrease in top of the funnels, so initial discovery searches, is perfectly fine if LLMs are sending through high intent buyers who've already done their research. And what we are seeing is that is what LLMs are doing. Whilst 58% of all searches are now result in a zero-click response, right? That's where our traffic's going, our organic traffic's going. Traffic referred by an LLM is 5 times more likely to convert than from a traditional organic search. So we are seeing both things happening at the same time, and both and that feels like it's a good thing. A drop in organic traffic, but an increase in the intent and the value of traffic that's referred by an LLM. Just linked to a point that Paul made right at the top of the meeting. Another interesting stat that we've seen that's been persistent over the last few years: the average volume of interactions that a buyer has with a vendor remains today, and the last time I looked at this research was about 3 or 4 weeks ago, it remains at 16. That's been the case for 3 or 4 years. 16 different touch points, 16 different kind of interactions that a tech buyer has with a vendor. That hasn't changed, even though the first stages of the journey are now automated. So this isn't reducing the opportunity to connect. Nothing that we're talking about is removing or reducing the opportunity that we have and that our brand has to connect and interact with our potential buyers. It's just moving the non-automated connection. It's removing any brand interaction or any interaction you would have through your website further down the funnel, and that's a good thing. But that does mean that we need to balance good storytelling with kind of machine readable category framing. We are catering right now for 2 different types of intelligence, human and kind of algorithmic. And at the moment, our content needs to embrace both of those, the way that both humans and LLMs and agents synthesize and organize information. And finally, we have to transition from kind of broad generic topic or generic thematic thought leadership to publish more instructional layers, more guides, and more blueprints that agents can actually kind of use to execute tasks. So those are the kind of key components to how we feel a modern content strategy can do everything it used to do conventionally, but also understand that LLMs are part of the buying journey now. Okay, Paul. So how do we operationalize this? That's the critical kind of part of this, and the reason that Paul and I are doing this, and the reason that we are we're beginning to talk with more conviction now than we were even at the beginning of the year. This is still a discussion, right? We're still learning every day, but we've done this enough, and we've stress tested this enough to be able to do things like this kind of 90-day path to an integrated geo position. The first phase, the kind of first month, let's focus on auditing and foundations. Use Jedi. Jedi is not only a brilliant tool for diagnostic, but it becomes a planning tool, because what comes out of the Jedi tool are insights into themes and that you need to be owning in terms of the articulating your category at the intersection of two well-established concepts, and also it'll show you where competitors might be outpunching you around certain themes and how. So that first month is about diagnostics and about auditing and foundation building. Any kind of analysis, Jedi particularly, will help you understand visibility, audit semantic gaps against competitors, and kind of establish structured foundations. From there, phase 2, month 2, days 31 to 60, whatever you want to call it, is about building and seeding. It's about building that content strategy, that one single content strategy that sits in the middle of your marketing operations and talks to every channel, and specifically creates and understands the needs to create content for both human consumption and algorithmic kind of synthesis. And the next important job in that phase, and lowest hanging fruit really, is about repurposing existing content. That you're going to have loads of thought leadership that's tucked away. You're going to have a lot of important product pages and landing pages and hub pages that, if we think about the bridge strategy, if we think about the 3 pillars, there needs to be that consistency, and the right thing to do is before you think about how that consistency affects new content, is to audit your existing content and repurpose it through the framework of those 3 pillars. Look at particularly thought leadership. Make sure that the way that you talk about your product, your category, your value proposition is absolutely consistent across all of them, and is consistent from thought leadership to website, and is consistent from website to coverage. You can't change coverage, but you can change your own kind of thought leadership. So that would be a really important phase 2 thing to do. That enables us to then move into phase 3, which is about focusing on kind of expansion and measurement. Establish your LLM visibility scorecard, again using a tool like Jedi. Get down to publishing your technical glossaries and your frameworks. Focus on the bringing in the new content, bylines, methodology-driven bylines and trade media, and updating new landing pages, and then expanding that to the other important nodes that the LLMs use: social, paid platforms, community platforms, and kind of forums. Again, driving that consistency. But at that point on day 90, that's when we begin to venture that the work that we would recommend should be visible. You should be able to see it moving the needle from an LLM citation, and that would be when at day 90 you run your first tests to measure that kind of AI recognition. But we would expect, based on this approach, that by day 90 you should see some improvement. Crack on. But that was all quite technical, necessarily technical, but this is the language and the models of content strategy now. And if anything, if we're saying anything, it's not about learning an entirely new language. It's not about learning new techniques. It's about understanding what has always worked and the conventions that we've always adhered to, how to use those in order to understand this new kind of paradigm for LLMs. So let's distill that down into some takeaways. Invest in higher authority earned media, right? That's an important one. Focus on specialist trade titles. Understand where you're the right kind of media targets. Understand what domain authority is. It's very easy to research the relative domain authority of media partners. One placement there is worth more than 10 on a site that an AI doesn't rate or rank highly from an authority perspective. Strengthen analyst and institutional relationships. Right, analysts are an important part. They are really important custodians of brand perception and brand reputation. They're also an important node of influence. So in complex markets, AI does use these bodies to correctly categorize you. So strengthen your relationships there. Make owned content work as hard as earned. So again, as we've already been through, ensure website, thought leadership, product content has that consistency and mirrors your PR language. Consistency creates success in this context. Consistency creates facts for LLMs. Inconsistency creates claims and therefore weaker signals. And then finally, treat geo as an integrated challenge. As a marketer, I've always thought that PR is a multi-channel, multi-format discipline. Earned media is YouTube. Earned media is Reddit, as well as trades and kind of media relations. But LLMs have really kind of thrust this into a stark kind of urgency. Category framing, attribute ownership, external validation across those important nodes all must work together. And when it does, that is how you're going to be able to outpunch bigger competitors, category leaders, and see that kind of 90-day impact. Okay. And finally, the reality is, if your brand isn't appearing in the sources these systems use, you're less likely to appear in the answers that your buyers see. Or even before they even visit your website and speak to your sales team. The ultimate point is that this has become that initial first point of discovery. You know, a Jedi assessment can help you at that stage one, help you in build that the 3 pillars, help you build the diagnostic and the measurement that you need in that first month in order to set yourself the parameters and the content strategy that you need. It can show you exactly how you are currently represented across the key LLMs. We can map which sources are shaping your visibility, identify where your competitors are gaining ground. And again, crucially, it isn't just a diagnostic. A Jedi assessment becomes a planning tool. It becomes the first part of your content strategy. So it is it's something that's proprietary. It's out of the box. It's ready to go. And an analysis or an assessment like this is the first step of creating a content strategy that achieves everything that a content strategy needs to in this kind of modern interpretation of influence.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. There's one other thing to mention, and that is that because we're a global network, global agency, we have realised that the results from the prompts varies from region to region. So if you put the same prompt into Jedi in Japan versus London, you're going to get different results. And that's important if you are trying to assess the discoverability or your AI visibility in a home market or an area that you're trying to expand into, etc. So having the opportunity to run prompts in multiple countries is obviously an important factor here. And it's just another consideration just to be aware of. Okay, well, that kind of concludes the slideware. I mean, as Takeo mentioned, and if any of you have any particular questions for us, we have about 10 minutes remaining. So let us know, fire them in. We've got a few coming in here. So first one, can we expect LLM companies selling ad space within their ecosystems? Because OpenAI lost $38.5 billion in 2025, would it make sense for them to simply sell ad space? Any views on that, Dan? That feels like a nasty question to me.
Yeah, it's already happening. Gemini is already providing an opportunity for sponsored citations or sponsored kind of links within citations. I don't think it's necessarily because any of them are losing billions of dollars and the cost of compute is about to significantly increase in the next kind of month or so. I think it's following as we've repeated over the course of this session. It's following the same conventions that the evolution of SEO did, and the evolution of all digital marketing. Paid activity has an important role to play in this kind of content ecosystem, and it isn't just about your organic or earned. So yes, we can expect it. It's already happening, and it will have the same kind of impact that paid search has against organic search. Both are fairly simple to cater for, and both are necessary to cater for.
Yeah, thanks. We've got another one here that actually touches on something which I've spoken about separately. So we're talking about the need for balance. And on the one hand, we need to attract the attention of the LLMs to increase AI visibility, but we still need to maintain that human interest as well. So how do you kind of marry the two things and create that balance and create content which is compelling for a human audience, but also gets scraped by the machines? And are we going to get into a space where you've got hidden content strategies specifically for the machines versus for humans? Now, actually, I think that touches on what we talked about earlier about the potential that you're actually building this newsroom capability within Jedi to precisely do just that, and actually create a newsroom specifically to inform the LLMs in a language that they are going to be more instantly receptive to, and leave the human stories to the humans.
Yeah, that's right. So we are pushing more towards having an AI newsroom. And when we say AI newsroom, we really mean a newsroom tailored to AIs. This is not something you want to read as a human being because it's abstract. It's just all formatted for them in markup, in text, in JSON, in all of these formats to help them logically assess and especially condense the information quickly and make sense of the structure without breaking through their token limits and especially their context windows. Because in the end of the day, these LLMs are made for speed and they need to be, to the point that we just heard, consistently effective and especially efficient. Therefore, less compute is good. And if you give them less to work on, they like it. So in other words, to answer that question, yes, you should have a parallel strategy. You have a human facing newsroom with good stories. They are still extremely valuable, especially if you like to read, right? This is about the expression of the mind. But then you have the AIs who don't really think, but rather have to sort their tokens and their logic. And they need to have a separate entity to look into. And that's what we call AI newsroom. And that will work in parallel. And to the question of visibility, yes, it is visible. But if you click on it as a human being, you will basically immediately say, oh, that's not for me, because you can't read it, because it's all computer language.
I'd also add that we're seeing plenty of backlash in terms of machine optimized content trying to influence, traditional editorial experts, right? And the criticism of AI inspired dog food trying to land on respectable editorial sites. So I think that the earned media side of things is certainly better policed, but it's not necessarily the same in the owned world. To Dan's point about being more intentional and actually making sure that we are trying to get that balance right between the earned and owned media sources. Okay, I don't have any other questions. So unless anybody else wanted to make any final points, I think we're in a position where we can draw everything to a close. Just to summarize, yeah, obviously.
Another question. There's another coming. There was another question just posted.
Oh, okay, good eyes. How did the LLMs interact with sponsored paid content? Did the tools consider this content earned? How's that? Right, good question. And actually, we were Taki and I actually had this very conversation about a week ago to see if we could actually create another category for Jedi. And the short answer is no, you can't. But there is a particular discovery mechanism in Jedi that enables you to search particular keywords to help shape whether an article is paid or not. So if you look at things like sponsored advertorial, if you look at partner content, different publications have different terms for it. You can actually quite scientifically use all of the keywords that denote what's paid and what's earned, and actually create that distinction. But actually, the machines don't readily spot it, right?
And one more thing to add, Paul, as we actually tried around this, and this is a very good question. Jedi, for instance, as the tool is made, it actually absorbs all the citation websites as a complete source. And it is based on that able to then distinguish some of the editorial because they use exaggerated notations and language. So they don't say, journalistically speaking, properly, this is a comparison. They will say, this is the best, most amazing tool you've ever seen. So that's not how a journalist would write. And they can distinguish that based on the language. So in fact, the basic language pattern that used to be a thing for editorial might need to take a step back, and we need to talk more realistically and not too much marketing jargon, because LLMs are not stupid enough to fall for it. So we can actually distinguish some of it. Of course, there will always be some that falls through the roster, but then a human being might be able to do that, to distinguish by looking at the source.
So if you reinterpret that another way, if you're struggling to get traction for a particular part of your, I don't know, your technology portfolio, or a particular market opportunity that's not really being well served by media, if you write a paid opportunity with proper editorial rules around it, then the LLM's not going to be able to distinguish. You're going to be returned on the LLMs, and you're actually going to drive visibility for that particular opportunity. So it does bring an extra dimension to paid media relationships, and I think that that's good for the media community that we are working with, because they need support, right? They need ongoing investment. They are dwindling in numbers, and they are, they're providing an excellent supportive service to us in the marketing and PR world. So the more we can do to help them, I think the better. Right.
I think we have one from Edward Taylor. We've got one quick one, and just to touch on it, super quick. Edward made a really important point about needing to find a balance between attracting the LLM, but also, kind of appealing to the human, and asked if we've come across any tactics or any kind of hidden content strategies whereby content that's created for LLMs, for instance, using Markdown content, can be created and is indexable, but not navigatable or searchable to humans. And the answer is yes, that's entirely possible. It happens a lot already, probably, obviously more than we're likely to be aware of, because we can't navigate to it. But that would be a way of separating the two different types of content. It's, as we've seen and discussed, the interaction with a brand, with a vendor, is not reducing. The appetite for interaction is not going anywhere. There's just an additional layer at the top. So therefore, appealing to humans as well as LLMs, and both of them, is really important. So a very sensible strategy would be to have certain markdown content, or certain kind of content that's structured and written only for LLM congestion, and simply make it invisible and impossible to navigate from a human's perspective. Entirely possible.
Absolutely. So yes, this whole webinar is recorded. If you've registered, you will get a link to be able to access the recording. That's absolutely fine, and we will, by all means, drop us a note if you're having trouble accessing that. And then obviously all that's left for me to say is that if you need, or you're interested in actually finding out how visible you are from an AI perspective, we're here to help. Jedi could quite easily be at your disposal. Let us know. And otherwise, we hope you found this interesting, and thank you very much, Lee, for joining us all, and enjoy the rest of your day wherever you may be.
Thank you, everyone.